I was reading. I've got a book called the Gnostic Scriptures. It's different from the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, but it does have a
Yeah.
bunch of the Gnostic Scriptures in it. But in it has the secret book of John, and I'm reading that. And the story is John goes to the temple, and a Pharisee is there, and a Pharisee kind of questions John about Jesus because he's not there anymore, and John gets distraught, and so John goes out, and then Jesus appears to him in a vision and begins to explain the monad to him, and he starts, and Jesus actually tells John, tells the Apostle John, I am God, I am the Father, I am the Son, and I am the Mother. So, so let's shift gears a minute and let's talk about the Gnostic idea of creation and the monad and all that stuff. I don't know if you want to use your whiteboard for that, but however
sure.
you want
I'm
to
gonna
do it.
clear it up.
All right.
So the thing you got to keep in mind about the Gnostic Scriptures is Gnosticism, by its very nature, transcends the word. So the very idea of having scriptures to articulate Gnostic teachings is a bit of an irony. You know, it's almost like Nietzsche's writing. It's all irony. It has to be, because every imposition of a word on your mind is me just on a power quest. So why? And anybody who's writing is on a power quest. So how do you transcend that? And the Gnostics would say, and along with the Romantic movement, is that's the importance of poetry and music and kind of these transcendent arts, because the rational use of language, the grammatical use of language is oppressive, but these kind of transcendent understandings of language, of music, art, poetry, and such things. That's why when you read Gnostic literature, it's all very bizarre, very poetic and bizarre. But anyway, so when they talk about I'm the Father, I'm the Mother, and all this stuff, what he's really saying is I'm nothing. You know, I'm whatever you want to call me. That's what's really going on with it. So in the Gnostic myth, there's this thing, you know, the monad, okay? And the monad is what we would call God, but it's something that transcends God. It transcends all human language. It's not negative theology. It's not, oh, we can talk about him in the negative. It's just something that we can't even talk about because it transcends every human attempt to define it or understand it. So there's this monad. Now, monad, okay, so getting into the creation account itself, this is how I like to explain that. So imagine you're a head in outer space beyond the stars, and everything is pitch dark, and you're just a head floating around. You have to be a head because you can't see your hands, you can't see anything. All right? And that's basically monad in himself. Well, in himself, if you're in that situation, let's say you were born that way, you never know anything else but the complete outerness of outer space. Is there any thought that you could have? Is there anything you could speak about or have a thought? No, because there's nothing to think about. And you can't even say the word black, because what's black?
Right.
You can't say, there's nothing, there's no thought. And that's the idea. That's our original existence. And it's interesting because Jung, I forget his student's name, but he looks at the whole rise of us as like this. Like, this is us in the amoeba. You know, this is us when we're an amoeba. So this story is almost like a psychological tale of our own human development. But anyways, you have monad in the beginning, and his first thought is sort of, so if you're a head floating around in deep dark galaxy, the only thought you could have is of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, you need a mirror.
Yeah.
So that's how the Gnostics interpret and where did this come from? Who knows? But that's how they interpret the waters in the beginning, the deep, the God looking into his reflection.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what the secret book of John said. Just exactly how you are putting it. That is exactly how this whole thing started. So keep going. This is good.
Yeah. It's really interesting, actually. So he has his first thought, and that's like the first division. Okay, that's the first, like, now we don't just have one unity, but now we have a two. It's still the one, but it's reflective of the one. So that's called what protonoia or something, but the first thought. And then, and I'm not always certain how this works, but then there's this like ripple effect. Because once that first division is made, it results in all these other divisions, and they call them syzygies, and there's these male-female pairs that kind of ripple out from the monad. All this together is called the pleroma. And that simply is Greek for fullness. And this is the reality. This is the ground of being, not even being, but it's the ground of our existence. Okay. Now the last syzygy was a male-female pair, the female of whom was Sophia. Now Sophia, whenever these male-female pairs replicated, they always had to kind of get approval from the monad and the original male-female pair in order for that to happen. Well, Sophia decided to make something on her own and without anybody's permission. So she went off on her own and made this being, and it ended up being this monster called Yaldabaoth. And so she was ashamed of what she had made. She had made this monster because this being was not made in accordance with the harmony, the pleroma. So she put Yaldabaoth in this cloud, hid him in a cloud, and there Yaldabaoth made our universe. Okay? He made our universe. And so what that is to say, and this is who the Gnostics believe is the God of the Bible. This is the Old Testament God. He's a mistake of the cosmos. He's an aborted, that's the word that's used, an aborted mistake of Sophia that Sophia tried to hide. So Yaldabaoth is off in his own little realm, making his universe, the universe as we know it. And it's the material realm. It's the material realm. And the evil is the division. The evil is that everything is divided. It doesn't reflect this glorious pleroma where everything is one, but everything is divided up by material. Matter becomes the instrument or the means of separation and distinctness. Okay. Well, Yaldabaoth made these beings in his image. Okay. And Sophia had sympathy for him, so she put a spark of the divinity in these creations of Yaldabaoth, which is to say that each one of us, or not each one of us, but certain elite people, woke people, are the enlightened that have this spirit within, that have the monad within, and a bunch of other people don't. And the path of salvation is for us to deny this world, to deny everything about this world, to reject it, and find the God within, and ascend out of this world and back into the glorious pleroma. And that is the resurrection. And you can have that today if you want. You don't need a body for your resurrection anymore. You just need to have that gnosis, that knowledge, that glimpse of eternal or whatever. Yeah. And so that's the basic creation myth. Any thoughts on that question?
Well, I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you because I'm listening to the contemporary Gnostics, and I mean they've got hours and hours of lectures that they give over at GnosticTeachings.org, and so I get an hour drive to work, right? And I can listen to lectures. So one of the things that they seem to say, or when they talk about, and they mention these things here and there, they don't ever give a full picture of the creation story like you give, but they almost make this psychological. Do Gnostics believe in that this is a literal thing, or is this something that's just kind of psychological, I guess?
Well, today definitely, and this is due to the influence of Carl Jung, who's a huge character in my story that I talk about in my book. I don't know if the ancient Gnostics, if they were probably more literalistic. Who knows? Because they were very symbolical people back then anyways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we should look at this more as a psychological tale of archetypes. So monad symbolizes, our wholeness, our being one with the world or being one again. The pleroma represents the the collective unconscious of all of us, and the possibility of unity and oneness with our neighbors and with everybody else. Yaldabaoth represents that. And, I have this one quote in my book that talks about what Yaldabaoth represents, and any attempt to divide us. So male, female, that male to male. We only are male or female because of what our flesh says about us.
Right.
Being born in a family with a family name, that's just an accident of where you were born. The country you were born in with its boundaries, all these borders, so the way here's another big one. The way Yaldabaoth rules, he's got these 365 archons or powers that help him set up all the systems by which he rules. And boy, that's postmodernism right there. We're oppressed by the capitalistic system, by the system of merit-based use of money or whatever. We're oppressed by the system of patriarchalism and all these different systems we're oppressed by. And the salvation will happen when we shuck off these systems and live according to the pleroma inside and bring about a manifestation of utopia. Yeah. Now that itself gets into the more political angle, which we can, if you want to explore that, we can. But
one of the things I did want to mention while it's on my mind, because as we're talking about this whole psychological thing, I'm thinking of the New Age movement as well, because when I listen to these guys talk about this stuff, and they're talking about finding the God within, and they're talking about, what do they call it? Charkas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're talking about all this New Age stuff. So Gnosticism and New Age, they go together, don't they? Is Gnosticism or New Age really just old Gnosticism, I guess, that's kind of the question I wanted to ask.
Yeah. And Gnosticism probably has more Christian imagery going on, and New Age allows for more Eastern influence, but they're the same ideas. And that's why I say it is the theology of self. It's the natural theology of humanity. And it has always been the anti-theology. So Judaism has Kabbalah is an aspect of it. Yeah. Sufism in Islam is an aspect of it. And you look at all these different movements, and they all have basically the same traits. In my book, my first section, this talks about these like 12 or 13, whatever, traits of Gnosticism that you see throughout history. And they're just all very clear once you see them. So yeah, I would say the New Age movement is this sort of the more secularized version of Gnosticism in today's world.
Very good. So anything else about the whole creation thing that you want to discuss, or did you does that pretty much cover the topic of the Gnostic view of creation?
It's as I'm just thinking in my book about this, all the dimensions of the phantasmic and the doctrine of the self and love and passion and romance, and there's a lot of different areas to explore, but then we're talking several more hours. So,
seriously, we probably should get ready to wind it down. I do want to ask you though, however, because I not only sent you the clips, but I also sent you a copy of what?
Jesus Calling.
What did you think of that? Let me ask you, when you opened that up and read it, did it give you the warm fuzzies? Did it make you really want to talk to Jesus? Did you see some of the things that Jesus says in there? How feminine Jesus almost sounds. How it almost sounds like a romance between. And so that kind of is another form of Gnosticism, right there. This whole idea, this love affair that you have with the divine self or Jesus. You know what I mean? Did you get that vibe from that book?
Yeah. And you just opened a door, and again, that's the nature of this topic. It's like going into an old mansion and opening doors. Yeah. And you're like, should I go? Like, I have to. And then you're like, 5 hours later, you're like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But this whole idea of passion and romance with the troubadours goes all the way back to the Gnostics. And there's is it Saint? I forget this. One of the saints of the church. I can't remember his name, but he talked about the Gnostics and accused them of always listening to love songs. And, the love song, and remembering that Greek has three understandings of love: agape, philos, and eros. Their love song is very erotic, and there's a history going on with that. And what it is it's being in love with the phantasm of Christ and not Christ in his body. And we do this all the time. This gets back to idolatry again before. Think about what an affair is. An affair is trying to connect yourself with a phantasm of something that you're looking for that satisfies some deep need you have. Mm-hmm. There's nothing real to it. Everybody, there's nothing real to them. But that we do that all the time. We kind of look at the phantasm of something as a means to self-transcendence. Mm-hmm. And that love is very much wrapped into that equation. So already way back in the early church, the Orthodox fathers were looking at Gnostic worship and saying, they're doing all these love songs. And, these have no role in the church whatsoever. And the love songs themselves came from some of the mystery religions, which is a whole nother interesting thing. But no, so I'm reading that book. And very often, I do these little investigations I did a little investigation of writing just to kind of test it. And this is a good test to do when you go to a service. It's the Jesus test. How often do they talk about Jesus? Okay. And now keep in mind, I read a little bit of it, and right away I was like, oh boy. And I read the first few dates. I read today's date and yesterday's date. And I kept on seeing my presence. And I'm like, yeah. I remember running across that when I was reading, what's his name? The book is Hostage to the Devil. But the devil refers to himself as a presence. It's just it's mind blowing that Christians are falling for this garbage. But anyways, he keeps on talking about presence. I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I put every word in the book in an Excel spreadsheet, and I did a counting of what words are used more than any other word. And here's other than some of the basic words that like the and a, but guess which word is used more than any other word in this book? You. Okay, so this author is saying you. Guess, then that's 4,100 times the word you is used, and I is used as the next one. Jesus is used only 112 times. And Jesus Christ.
And this is Jesus, well, including the title, I'm assuming then.
Yeah. And then half of those, I was looking at them. I'm like, okay, well, that seems like a lot, actually, given what she's doing. And then most of those are quotes of the Bible. So, because I was looking at the first couple of days and I wasn't seeing Jesus at all.
Right.
And anytime you're not hearing the name Jesus, you should start getting worried.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there a bunch of other words were used. Well, then I thought, well, that's weird. Why wouldn't you talk about Jesus if your whole book is about Jesus calling? Well, then I realized here's a quote from her preface, the beginning of the book. I have written from Jesus's point of view.
Yep.
In other words, first person singular, I, me, mine, always refers to Christ. That is a quote. Mm-hmm. The first person singular, I, me, mine, always refers to Christ. You refers to you, the reader. So the perspective is that of Jesus speaking to you.
Yeah. And
that is
scary stuff, because she got that idea from a New Age book that was written in 1934 called God Calling. And these women were calling themselves the two listeners. They are anonymous. They would not give their names. That was the authors, the two listeners. They would get together and they would sit in silence and they would write down what God spoke. Now, there's a devotional book called God Calling. You can look at that as well, and it's very similar to Jesus Calling. Now, in the old version of that book, she mentions God Calling being a treasure to her. But then later on, she got some flack from the publisher, and she got in trouble from the publisher, I guess, or whatever. The publisher anyway removed it. I'm not sure whether it was her or the publisher that decided that what was best, but they removed the references to God Calling. So that whole idea is New Age. So that whole book is her sitting in a quiet place, listening to Jesus talk to her, and her writing it down. So it really should be scripture, to be quite honest with you, because if she's going to write what Jesus is saying, if those are the actual words of Christ, why not just add Jesus calling to the Bible?
I mean, Jesus didn't even write down.
No.
That's the irony. Jesus didn't even write down. And he himself said, I don't bear witness of myself. She's bearing witness to herself and saying she is Jesus. which if you look at how Jesus talks about the Antichrist, many people will come in my name and say, I am the Christ. That's what happens when God leaks out of Christ and there becomes a fuzzy line where God ends and you begin, and you make transcendent, you project your pious thoughts, name them Jesus, and now you believe you're Jesus. That's what she is, an Antichrist. This is devil itself at work.
Yeah. And I like I said, people are just, that read this are so love this book. I just, you walk in the Hobby Lobby and it's on the shelves as soon as you walk past the little bookshelf in the front. You go to Walmart, it's sitting on the Walmart shelves. It's in every Christian bookstore. She's got Bible studies. She's got, Jesus Calling study Bible. Just, oh man, it's crazy. But yeah, that's Gnosticism to a T right there.
Yeah. So. And this whole idea, we have to address this too, because you run across this in all these Gnostic, anti-Christian things, be still and get out in the woods and sit in the silence and get all the busyness of life away from you, and you can hear God's voice talking to you. And they oftentimes use the account of Elijah going down to Horeb and waiting, seeing the wind and the fire and the earthquake or whatever, and then he all he heard was a still small voice. And they say, see, look, that's how it works. You sit still and then you hear God, which is a total misapplication of that text if there ever was one. Elijah was going down to Horeb because he wanted to recreate the Moses event. He wanted to go down and get this big dramatic, coming of God to create a new people with him. He went down there and he got some big dramatic things. It wasn't God. And then all he got was, and the phrase is not a still small voice, but really what it means is the sound of silence. What it means is he heard nothing. He heard nothing. So he heard nothing. And then what does God tell him to do? And this is what's great about it. This big dramatic, Elijah going down to hear God's still small voice. What does God tell him to do? Get back to your job. Go anoint this person to be prophet. Basically do your work. You got a vocation. I called you to go do something. Go do it. So all these women who are like, oh, I'm waiting for God's still small voice to tell me what to do. I feel like he wants me to do this. I feel like he wants me to do that. And, I'm listening to God. Take care of your family.
Yeah.
You got plenty to do. Put the Facebook down and take care of your family.
Yeah.
This is true for everybody. I mean, everybody's looking for God's voice, looking for what God wants them to do. And it's like, you've got your calling right there staring in your face. Go do it.
Yeah. Well, men get involved with, or men really have started to read this book too, unfortunately. Anyway, Pastor Burfeind, we have been on this call for what, an hour and a half now, I think, something like that.
About an hour and 10 minutes. About an hour, yeah.
Okay.
10 minutes.
All right. We can go on if you want. We can call it. If you had anything else that you wanted to share on your board there, hey, that was great, and I appreciate you doing that. I'm glad you mentioned that to me, that you wanted to do that, because that's just that was a really good presentation. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fun.
All right. So we'll get together again and we'll talk more sometime about Gnosticism, and thank you very, very much. You took a lot of time here to come on this little tiny YouTube channel. So I thank you very much for taking the time out and doing it. Pastor Burfeind. Thank you very much for joining us.